Welcome to another episode of Corporate Underground. I want to take this opportunity to talk this week about something that's been affecting a lot of people that I'm working with and a lot of my friends over the last week or two, and that is the topic of vulnerability, particularly in business. What I've found over my working experience is I started being very unvulnerable in the corporate world. The more you share, the more I felt that people would use against me. And as I've grown and matured, I found that to be the exact opposite. And opening up myself to being vulnerable has actually led to a lot of deep relationships. It was actually one of the starts for Corporate Underground in a lot of ways. So today, we're going to talk about vulnerability and how that affects some of the panel and some things you can do to accept this new way of thinking. Ayatollah of rock and roll of Finn. When have you been vulnerable?
Oh, geez, such a good question. And it's there's so many points in my life where, when I was young, it was I was never interested in school. I went to a Christian school. I used to get the strap all the time for asking questions. I was interested in the arts. I got involved in dancing, singing. I did about 20 TV commercials when I was young. I did a couple of movies. I was like a child actor. I was interested in the guitar was my main thing. And I was constantly teased through school. So I came from being so excited and being on TV. So all the kids would tease me at school. And I was, I had lots of money coming in from these commercials. And I thought it was amazing. But everyone used to tease me. I was born in Liverpool. So I talk like that, Finbar Island from Liverpool. And, so it was sort of a strange time because I was really vulnerable. I was so excited and everyone was just criticizing me. I was going to Johnny Young's talent school and dancing and doing all this stuff. And then I really closed down. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to become this, I'm not going to share anything with anyone because, it's too hurtful. So I just went on then and started to do my thing and not talk about it. So I built this real wall around me. I didn't want to share anything because I was too afraid to be criticized. But it didn't take so long. And then I got in a band and we started touring and got on all the pop charts and all that sort of stuff. And I was like 17 and, I left school and I started to realize that, for me, at least anyway, it was sort of the criticism, the wall I built up, it actually got me more comfortable in being vulnerable because I stopped caring so much about what people think, but I still shared it with everyone. So I went through this metamorphosis of being so excited and sharing it and then being criticized and built this wall up, which I didn't want to share anything. I just had this persona. And then as I started to do my thing and got some success at it, I just let it go. And it taught me a lot about, just like what you said, Matt, I had to go through this period of learning whereby it wasn't just a buzzword of vulnerability for me. I had to go through the pain, which was a little bit like last week's episode. I had to go through the pain of being criticized and take that learnings. And I came through it at quite a young age, actually, by going, I don't care if I get the strap. I don't care what people think about me. I'm just going to do my thing. And hey, look, at 52 years old, look at me. I still look like an old Bon Jovi rocker. I love my life. I do my thing. So I've got to this point where I think that, and I can't judge anyone else, but I think that, this corporate world has built this sort of persona where people are living this life. And COVID has really changed that, where people are sort of starting to go, well, who am I? And my persona doesn't even matter anymore. I can be turned up to a Zoom call in my pajamas, but what does that mean for my identity? And it doesn't matter what car I drive anymore. No one really cares, it's this because I can't drive it anyway. And so it's been this reshake. But again, referring to last week's episode where we talked about pain, these are, if we know how to deal with these situations, for me, that was the bit that helped me become better at vulnerability. Because for me, vulnerability has a negative connotation of being, oh, okay, I'm vulnerable, so I'm weak. And that's just something that's been programmed into me. But I don't necessarily think vulnerability is actually bad. The programming says it's bad, but I'm like, so what if I'm vulnerable? Like, why is it actually bad? I think it's actually awesome.
Well, vulnerable is not bad. You're right. We have been programmed. It starts as little as when you're in school and you put your hand up and you get the answer wrong. You get told you're wrong, and then every kid laughs at you. So literally, that's little stuff. And then when you get older in leadership, there's this mentality that if you're the leader, you can never be wrong. It dates back to if you're saying, you're putting your hand up saying, I know the answer, which means if I'm in the leadership role, it means I know the answer. If you ever go, I don't know the answer, then there's this idea that you are weak. And this is something that needs to be knocked down because you're never going to progress past a facade if you do that.
It's interesting you say that, because my definition of leadership is someone who can get the best out of other people, not someone who knows more than anyone else. So it's interesting, that perspective. You know, I understand what you're saying, but it's interesting how people have a different perspective.
Yeah. So when was the time you opened up to someone and took a chance and something positive happened? What's one of your stories?
Yeah, totally. I've just been really like turning somersaults head from what you've all been sharing, because for me, vulnerability has moved away from telling people about what's happening inside me and has been more about creating spaces of safety and trust, that I naturally do that. I naturally want to be open and share these sort of vulnerable moments and these metamorphoses with people. I've become even open about how I'm feeling and sensing, and I think that has really been received by the people that I've chosen to speak with in a way that honors how I'm feeling. That honoringness of, I receive you, I see you, you are who you are, and I are, is so beautifully fighting for more, for a deeper share, or a conversation about who I am right now. It could be that I'm a different person in the future, but for me, receiving me how I am right now is one step towards deeper trust in our relationship.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. So I'm going to share this. This is actually how Tony and I actually met, and Mary Henderson. My partner and I are a bit late to having kids. We had a kid very early. Well, not very early, but we had a kid first time. It was fantastic. And then we went through 2.5 years of miscarriages. There was a number of miscarriages that had happened. And I never shared this with anybody. I took this all on myself. It was a problem for me. I needed to protect. It was the first time that anything had really happened in my life that I had no control over. I'd lost business deals, I've lost lots of different things, but I'd never always been in control of my destiny, and this was out of my control. So I went very in, and I took a couple of years off, and I had to look after my family and my partner. I was in a lucky position that I could do that. And then we had my youngest son, and I didn't realize this until I put him into his room after it was been in our room for the first 9 months of his life. I felt I could breathe, because I'd been waiting for 9 months for him to pass away, because it had been that built into me that this loss had carried through. And I'd never shared that with anybody. Then I went to a meeting, a marketing meeting, where I turned up, and I was pretty much starting to pull myself out. And I was told I was one of the speakers to talk about networking. I had no idea. So I stood up and I told my story. I said, this is the first meeting I've had in 2.5 years where I've come out and I'm nervous, I'm a bit scared, but this is how I do networking. And this is how I'm going to do networking from now on. I'm going to be me. And if you don't like it, well, this is how it's going to go. And Tony walked over and sat next to me and had his chat. We spoke. And then Mary came over and she told me, now those two people are my first clients. 6 months later, and I'm building a business and it's growing incredibly well. But if I hadn't been vulnerable, I wouldn't have met Tony, I wouldn't have met Mary, wouldn't have Corporate Underground, I wouldn't have met Tia. All these things have connected to a very, very happy place for one moment when I said, screw it, what was working for me before? And I'd done very well financially, but I wasn't happy. And that changed when I was vulnerable. And it's moved me to a lot higher remark pass. So going to that, I'd like to know from the rest of the panelists what common sense things you've done and you do to challenge yourself to be more vulnerable. Tony.
I think being vulnerable is kind of like being honest, basically, isn't it? I mean, if you're being vulnerable, you're being honest about something that you, for some reason, whether it's because it's trauma or whether it's just something that you don't feel comfortable about, is holding you back. Okay? And like anything, if someone's got you by the scruff of the shirt from behind when you're trying to walk forward and they're just like skating behind you, how much is that slowing you down? So if you literally just take that weight off yourself, just be honest. Like if you want to really create a support network, a support network is just people around you, okay, which is just basically friends at the end of the day. If you just want friends, like genuine friends, both in the workplace, personal life, whatever you want to call it, then be yourself and be honest. And that means sharing things that you're worried about, sharing things that you think you're not good at, and just talking up. And this is ongoing. It was like Matt the other day when I gave you a call, and I was like, am I thinking really negatively when I think that all these people are full of crap with all their bubbliness? Like, am I wrong for thinking a room full of bubbly people means it's a room full of liars? Like, I don't know, am I being negative because of my past? And just that ability to have that honest conversation instead of me going, Tony, you've stopped being so negative and judging myself. Do you get me? Like, this is that whole thing of just me saying something that I'm worried that if I said that, would he then judge me? Matt might think Tony's being negative, stop being a jerk, Tony. Like, so it's literally, you need to do that more in your life. And you can't build that network, to be honest with, until you be honest initially. So it's a snowball effect.
I think, at least for me, it's being vulnerable is actually understanding yourself first, is being able to understand who you are and what are the triggers that you might be sensitive about. And then for me, what I did in the early days, and I still do it these days, is I have a very select group of friends who I know I trust implicitly, that I can share stuff with them and I can feel them out and they will give me some honest feedback. And that way, because not everyone's going to resonate with what I have to say. And look, I've built a very thick skin these days. One of my sayings is not that I don't care, it's just that I don't care. And what I mean is, it's not that I don't care about what you have to say, or that you don't care about, the fact that I don't care about you. It's just that I'm too busy doing other things. It's not a diss on you or your perspective. And so to get to that point, though, it's been a gradual evolution of being able to trust in a few select people and allowing that mentorship between them. Is this okay to say? Is that okay? What do you feel about that? At least just to get yourself comfortable. And you might find that as you're opening up, you might build a network. I didn't know about that. What about this? And that just helps you, at least that helped me start to get to a point where I could be vulnerable. But at least from my perspective, how can I be vulnerable unless I know who I am and what I'm vulnerable about? Right. So it's what are the things that I'm sensitive about? Why am I sensitive about them? Why am I scared that someone might connect with me on it? These are internalizing questions which really help your own evolution before you go out and worry about whether you're being vulnerable to anyone else. And what it does is it builds a spine of strength within you to sort of be more comfortable rather than hanging off what anyone else thinks about you. So for me, vulnerability is intrinsically linked to a response from someone else, because if someone responds differently, then it might affect your sort of emotional state. So I don't know, if I'm probably rabbiting on. It probably doesn't make any sense what I'm talking about. But
it totally does. And I think, for me, what I take away from that is that we're in this hall of eternal mirrors. Society is all of these mirrors. And as we become more vulnerable and take the sting out of our armor, the fight out of our armor, we're able to actually move from using society and society's mirrors to using our own mirror, right?
Yeah.
Like, to have society's reflections, like you saying, I don't care, is you saying society may have all of these faces, but mine is.
Yeah.
I think, or just on it, professionally or personally, we all like to grow at something. So if you're a musician, you always want to grow in your skill. If you're in personal training, you may want to grow and be able to run a mile or lift a certain amount of weights. And the only way to grow is to be challenged. And I feel if you don't open up and be vulnerable with things, then no one can challenge you, and no one can help you with this progress, this growth in your life. So it's actually a huge positive that comes from it if you do it in the right scenario. Same as if you want a music coach, personal coach, life coach, they've got to be the right person. Okay, so being vulnerable with the right person is key. Okay, because if you open up to a toxic person, then you are literally opening yourself up, and they're just going to pour poison right on that wound. That's not going to help. So you do have to pick the right people, and that is a process, which is too much to go into now. But when you are vulnerable or open to the right person, you will grow and you will be better in a lot of ways.
Great point, Tony. I know you see that all the time with people giving advice and to the wrong place, but it's good advice. It's just not delivered well, or it's from the wrong person. But one of the things I do to challenge myself is I'm naturally an introvert who's become an extrovert because I needed to lead a business and I had to get it out there and had to take those things through. But I actually really don't like going out that often. I'd rather stay home. But when I choose to go out, I use a massive amount of energy. So what I do to challenge myself and open up myself a little bit to be vulnerable is I go up to people and give a compliment to someone once a day. A little bit hard now that we're in lockdown. But I used to walk up to a guy carrying a book, and it's a great read, a great choice, or tell a woman she has fantastic shoes or earrings and expect nothing back from it, but just carry on walking. Because that made me challenge to go up and actually talk to someone. I was always the guy that would sit back in a bar and not go forward because I was too scared to. So this is a way that I kept on doing it. And I do this to today. The other thing that I do is I like to notice people. Again, another story, but I spend a lot of period of time homeless, and people just ignore you. You're just not, you don't exist. You're just not there. So I will always walk up to a homeless person and start a conversation. Not always, hey, you need to talk to me, but how's your day going? And just notice them because they are human and they're there. Or notice that the gardener's doing the gardening and go over and talk to them and understand and pull something out from them. Or the cleaner, the Uber driver, you talk to them. And all of a sudden, it took me out of being so introverted to be able to feel that I could actually talk. I was vulnerable in opening up to them and actually feeling uncomfortable to go and do that. But I've found some amazing people, some amazing stories out of that vulnerability to talk to them. And they obviously were vulnerable to talk back to me.
This is really, on a side note, I know when you came to my house in Venice, California, Matt,
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of work in the media business with my streaming video technology over in the US. And I had a big executive who was an investor in my company from one of the biggest studios in Los Angeles come over to my house. And, we were talking, we got on to talking about script writing and, like he's got a room full of these guys writing scripts for TV shows and movies and stuff. And we were talking about innovation and he goes, well, like he was talking about the film business, you're doing this thing. Well, how would you innovate the film business? I would go, well, first off, you just look at the boardwalk in Venice. And he goes, what? I go, we replace all your script writers. Every single one of these people has an amazing story. These homeless people that are sleeping on the street, right? You could probably find 10 or 20 film scripts here, get the rights for a really good price, really set someone up for life here. And, these people have lived and breathed the most amazing stories. And it's quite interesting how these things sit right in front of your face. And it blew his mind, to the point where he actually, I don't know exactly what he said he actioned that. But it's quite interesting how just, some of these things can sit in front of you. But to your point, it just reflected that memory. So sorry if I got off topic.
No, not at all. It was actually, that house was amazing. It was quite funny. Whenever I spend time with you, I always feel a little bit vulnerable because the people that you work with or introduce, and it's funny how you wouldn't see that, but I do. And sometimes the people around you, like, oh, wow, this guy's amazing. Then you get to know them and you go, that guy's a bit of a dick, But you're amazed by the people that surround people. And sometimes you do feel vulnerable, like, oh, will they like me or won't they like me? And then you get to know them and you go, well, actually, I really like that. Or it doesn't matter. It's just about passing information. But it starts with stepping out. And I've always admired that about you, Finn, how you've always taken on a challenge and moved on. And that inspires others, So it's great.
There's this thing about idolizing something where we're sort of getting to a point where even when we look at other people, we sort of idolize them, but we're not too sure why we idolize them. And that might be the sort of the society sort of mirrors all of these reflections on one person, right? And so everybody sort of like the fractals on just one person make it very difficult for one to see within oneself. I can't walk past somebody without having that connection with them because they're in my space. I'm in their space. And that space is a communal area. And for me, that is the bit about communing that allows us to go beyond ourselves. It allows us to invite others into that space. We can sort of, I think, Matt, you mentioned it earlier that, in a corporate environment, you sort of close off any of these events, and actually corporate environments encourage more sociopathic behavior because the more that you show any level of emotion, the less you are taken seriously. The number of times as a woman, I've been told that's just too much emotion. And for me, it didn't make any sense because I'm human. Humans have emotions and I'm able to express them and I'm able to share them. And if by sharing this emotion and sharing what makes me human, doesn't have space right here, then I'm happy to jump.
And that's really interesting because I found, at least in the work I've done in building these companies and having offices in different countries and between the music business and the media business and then tech, it was so suffocating in me connecting with people. I had no space to do anything other than just trying to deal with staff in different countries, trying to raise investor capital. I had no time for anything. And it was sort of, for me, it's when I'm in someone's space, and a lot of my musician or rock star friends or actor friends, you look at their life, and my life was chaotic. Their life is out of control. So it's just, everyone's on a different level. But that internal reflection within, when you've got the limelight on you and you're the person who all investors have invested in, or you're the guy, it's really interesting perspective to be in both planes, because when you're in the plane of everyone's looking at you, then you're trying to get everyone to stop looking at you so you can focus on the reason why they looked at you in the first place. So you get a level of success or clarity or aspiration or idolization because of the things you do. Then all of a sudden the things that you do and the idolization turns you into a place where you have no time to work on the craft. It's a really interesting sort of paradigm, and you've got to be so disciplined. It's that, who is the trusted filter here? I have friends who've sold 50 million albums, who have been in big movies, and they have an entourage of friends that hang out with them. And Matt knows some of these people, and these people will come and stay with me personally because I won't allow their entourage, because their entourage is bleeding them dry and taking them down a path where their self-interest in their entourage is the thing that's actually decaying the person. It's so many complexities on which part of the fractal you are. We're all in multiple stages. It's not binary, but it's that balance, it's quite fascinating.
Very much so. And Tia, on your point before, I do find that one of the superpowers of women in general is that they have always been more vulnerable. They have always taken that out. And it's a way of controlling that by saying, oh, that's not important because I can't do it myself. And as I'm getting more and more in tune with myself, I'm recognizing the power of that, because it really supersedes relationships. I mean, like, I was vulnerable around my good friend Rock and Roller, and he's helped me and I've helped him. And there's a number of our friends that have opened up and have been vulnerable, very vulnerable. And we've been there for one another, and it builds such a stronger foundation in life. So look, on that, we're not going to be around forever, but our knowledge that we pass will be. If you could talk to 20-year-old you, what advice or tip would you give about connecting to people, about stepping past and through that, being vulnerable and taking that on and helping others? Tia, what would you tell a 20-year-old you?
Such a good question. In particular, I would invite myself to honor my feelings, to honor how I sensed, to appreciate that energy never lies. So the moments where I felt the energy of a person or a place or a particular thing that I was doing, I was right to me. And going back to what Tony was saying, 10 out of 10 for a person is subjective. That subjective experience that I had was right and important for me. It was a point of reflection.
At a younger age, it would be more important for me to realize that I needed a different network. I didn't have one, I don't believe, at all at that age. So actually building a network that I believed in and they believed in me would have been very beneficial for when harder things came in life.
The secret to me living the life of my dreams is making sure that everyone I meet leaves with more than I take.
I know that 20-year-old me wouldn't listen to 40-year-old me anyway, so it's not really important. But I would say that the future is filled with people that want to help if you ask. Find people that you admire, connect with them, and ask them to spend 30 minutes with you, explaining why they were successful and opening yourself up doing something positive. There's that much intelligence and knowledge out there that you think you know it all. My father once told a man who came into his shop, and he said, look, can I get a job here? And my father said, look, there's a broom over there. I'm studying to be an engineer at university. He said, this is how you brush. This is how you broom. Get out. The guy wasn't willing to learn. He wanted to say what he knew. I think there's lots of times when at 20, we're not willing to open up, but there's lots of people that will help you. Look, thanks very much for coming this week, and appreciate all you listening to us.